Now, welcome to another edition of Battle of the Heroes and Villains, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll for Boba Fett. We'll then compare those results to all the other characters we've done thus far, before I then read and respond to some of your comments. But before we get to any and all of that, you can already nominate and or vote for which character we do next by heading down and responding to my pinned comment below with a character's name, or voting with a thumbs up if they're already listed. Whatever comment gets the most votes in the next 24 hours or so will be the winner. Okay, and now on to the poll for Boba Fett, where we'll see that 24% of voters gave him an A, 51% said B, 21% then thought he was a C tier character, which left 3% to give him a D, and a final 2% to give him an F. Which means when we do all the math here, and consider A a score of 5 and F a score of 1, Boba Fett ends up with an average score of 3.92. Which puts him into 19th place overall and 0.12 of a point behind Cad Bane of all characters, who, yes, is currently the highest ranked bounty hunter, though we've only done the two so far. Anyway, I'm just going to get right to what you all had to say about Boba Fett, but not before quickly once again thanking everyone who votes, comments, and watches the videos. It's all greatly appreciated. And now we start, as usual, with the top rated comment, which this time came to us from Jessica A, who said, "Some say he's overrated, while others think he's the coolest character in the franchise. I would fall somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. He's undeniably iconic, and I find it remarkable how he became a fan favorite with such limited screen time. His awesome look gives him a presence that's difficult to forget. I think he's the character that really set the stage for the underworld aspect of Star Wars. While we'd seen other bounty hunters before, he was the one that proved how intriguing the world of scum and villainy could be, and set up a whole new category of potential villains. I feel his best appearance was Empire, but he went downhill from there. His unceremonious death in Return of the Jedi really diminished him in my eyes. As for the prequel trilogy, I think his origin story is a bit strange and feels somewhat unnecessary. His appearances in the Clone Wars were fun for what they were, but never stood out that much to me, though I think the unfinished episode where he kills Cad Bane may have changed that. And I can't speak for the EU as I haven't come across any stories featuring him as of yet. Overall, I'm a fan, but not an absolute diehard, so to me, he's a B-level character. And I basically feel the same about Boba Fett. I like him, I do. I think he's a great character, especially if you dig into the EU version of him, but he's never been a personal favorite of mine, and I think B is the perfect grade for him overall, or when you take everything about him into consideration, and I'm really not surprised that over half the people or half the voters gave him a B here. Anyway, though you brought up a ton of good points about him, there was one thing in particular you touched on that I'd like to go further into, which is how his popularity basically spawned a whole other aspect to Star Wars, the bounty hunter aspect, if you will. But before giving my personal thoughts on the matter, let's get to a few other comments that touch on this subject to some degree, starting with this one from Christian Ba, who said, "His existence is the reason we have so many beloved things such as Jango, Din Djarin, Mandalorians, clones, and Rex. He didn't have that many lines or screen time, but he has a pretty big impact on Star Wars. I say A." Then we also had this one from Money Kenny, who said, "He walked so others could run. He is amazing given that he introduced Mandalorians into the Star Wars universe. I'm aware that he's not a real Mandalorian anymore, but other Mandalorians have been used better, like those in the Siege of Mandalore and the titular Mandalorian himself. B tier for me. I'd probably give him a C if he didn't make such an impression on me in Battlefront 2, 2005, and the LEGO Star Wars games." Also here we have this comment from The Confident Chicken, who said, "I love Mandalorians, and he's the one that started it all, and his legend stories make him an A for me." Then there's also this one from Mo, who said, "A lot of people like to make fun of Boba Fett for not accomplishing much in the OT, and say that people only like him because he looks cool. Maybe they're not entirely wrong, but couldn't you say the same thing about Darth Vader? Ignoring the prequels, what did Darth Vader do in the OT? He did get into some saber fights and was Luke's father, of course, and he did kill the Emperor, but most of his actual screen time is just him walking around, bossing around Imperial officers. Yet even back then, people saw him as fearsome and awesome mostly because of his appearance and the presence he gave off, and that's exactly why people like Boba Fett. Ultimately, Boba Fett is the reason why bounty hunters and Mandalorians are such a big part of Star Wars. If you don't have Boba Fett, you don't have Cad Bane, you don't have the Mandalorian Wars, and you obviously don't have the Mandalorian as a show. Boba Fett has an extremely large footprint in the DNA of Star Wars that we should all appreciate, even if he didn't have much to do in the films themselves. Okay, so for a moment here, let's imagine that Boba Fett had never really been all that popular, that no one had really cared about his appearance in The Empire Strikes Back. If he'd been just another character in that movie, do you really think Mandalorians would be what they are today? Do you think they'd have all this lore and stories about and around them, and that they'd have such a big part in the Star Wars universe overall, that we'd even have a show named after one, and a character very much modeled after Boba Fett himself? And the answer to those questions is obviously no, and do think about the influence that the popularity of Boba Fett in the original trilogy then went on to have on the prequels, because after Empire Strikes Back, George Lucas didn't really know or understand just how loved the character was, hence the kind of throwaway death he gets in Return of the Jedi. And so if no one had really cared about him, do you really think George Lucas ends up not only putting Jango Fett, his father, into the prequels, but then also making him the DNA template for all the clones? Alright, and moving on now, we have this comment from Milo Fettpants, who said, he questioned Darth Vader and got away with it. Not only did he get away with it, Vader felt the need to reassure him. We also then had this comment from Pawar LOS, who said, I want them alive, no disintegrations. That's how you establish in one line that this guy means business. And though, yes, Boba Fett is a cool looking character, and a lot of people pointed out in their comments that the design alone really gets you interested in him, but it's his interactions with Darth Vader that really sells this character, because he shows no fear of Darth Vader, who's arguably one of the most fearsome characters ever seen on screen. He even questions Vader, as the first comment pointed out, and demands to know what happens if Solo dies after he's put into carbonite. And instead of Vader telling him he's altering the deal, or if he dies, he tells him that he'll be compensated should that happen, which to me says that this is a business relationship that Vader doesn't want to jeopardize, that there is a level of respect here, and clearly from the no disintegrations line, Vader has obviously heard of Boba Fett. He's likely even done a job or two for him, which is why Vader decided to call the bounty hunters in the first place. They get the job done. And personally, I've always got the impression with how adamant Vader was that Fett had once disintegrated someone Vader sent him after. Either that or he just is famous for that. And yet here is Boba Fett, not only still alive after potentially crossing Darth Vader, but Vader still willing to hire him again. And so, yeah, Boba Fett looks awesome. It's a great design. But when you see the respect that Darth Vader is willing to give him, you're going to capture the attention of the audience as well. And we are going to like and be interested in this character. Alright, and moving on now, we have this comment from Third Enger, who said, he's a plot device, not a real character. His sole purpose in the franchise is to track down the Millennium Falcon. Lucas needed this plot device to get Vader and Luke to converge at the same place. He only became a more developed character because Lucas quickly realized the fans liked his look, he had a cool ship, and he could make money off the sale of this in the form of toys. A device of another sort, a money-making device. I have to say though, I used the Toy Slave One as my own device when I was a kid trying to learn US geography. The Toy Slave One ship looked like the state of Nebraska. That's how I remembered it. D for me. And though, yeah, I do agree with you that Boba Fett is essentially a plot device in The Empire Strikes Back, the story is obviously not about him, and he exists to explain how the Empire ultimately finds the Millennium Falcon. But the impressive part about him is, well, everything you kind of mentioned. That the design, the presentation, and everything else about this plot device was so good that he became more, or that people loved him and wanted to know more, and that his toys did sell, and so on. And so, to me, one of the cool things about him is that, in a sense, his legend was created or came about because of the fans, because we wanted and demanded more, and they gave it to us. Very similar to how Darth Maul was, yes, very cool in Episode 1, another cool and amazing design, but there wasn't a whole lot of substance to his character, so he too was brought back and expanded on, and now he has arguably one of the best and most interesting stories in all of Star Wars. But unfortunately for Disney and Lucasfilm, they tried to make another Maul or Boba Fett type character in the sequels out of Captain Phasma, but they missed the mark. Even though, actually, I think she's really, really interesting in the novel simply titled Phasma, which gives us her backstory. I even think it's one of the best novels in the new canon, and it's this sort of Mad Max meets Star Wars story, which surprisingly worked really well and is quite good. Okay, and moving on now, we have this comment from Tired Cyborg who said, I wished for Season 7 they brought back the Cad Bane versus Boba Fett arc instead of the Martez sisters arc. It would have been a nice conclusion to his rise to the top. Maybe they could still do his arc in the Bad Batch series since it's focusing on the underworld and bounty hunting in Star Wars. We then also have this comment from Dino MKing3 who said, I wish we got the Cad Bane Bounty Hunter Clone Wars arc where we see Bane fight Boba Fett. I do enjoy his character, and he has a fairly tragic story, being an unaltered clone, watching his father die, all his brothers in the war. I would say he deserves a B for what we see him in, but man, if we got that Clone Wars arc. Then there's also this comment from Gustavo Tulio who said, I wish we had the duel between him and Cad Bane in the Clone Wars episodes. It was like passing the torch for the best bounty hunter in the galaxy. And I really do think, or at least hope, there's a good chance we'll get that story arc in the upcoming Bad Batch series. The show's supposed to deal a bit with the criminal underworld and show how the Bad Batch sort of adapt to life after the Clone Wars and take on different sorts of jobs. So it seems like it'd be a perfect fit. And I also agree it would feel like a passing of the torch to see Cad Bane being defeated or killed by Boba Fett. And kind of speaking of that, let's get to this comment from Andrew Burton who said, he was pretty good in the original trilogy, except that embarrassing scene with the Sarlacc pit. He wasn't really a major character in Attack of the Clones. I can't really judge him too much there. I think he was at his best in the Clone Wars, where we saw how different he was from other bounty hunters, and when he was trying to kill Mace Windu. And though in my opinion young Boba Fett is fine in the prequels, I do think he's better in the Clone Wars as we start to sort of see him rise within the bounty hunter community, I guess you could call it. Which is why it would have been nice to get to see that Clone Wars arc with him and Cad Bane, and why I still hope to get to see it in the Bad Batch. And I also did like how he was obsessed with trying to kill and get vengeance on Mace Windu, and who knows, maybe Windu survived his encounter with Palpatine and Fett will end up tracking him down. Maybe he'll even track him down for Darth Vader, and instead of capturing him, like Vader wants him to, Fett disintegrates him and everything gets tied together. Though I do highly doubt that'll happen for a few reasons, not the least of which is I think Vader would indeed kill Boba Fett for not bringing him Windu alive and instead disintegrating him. Next up here then we have this comment from Blake Davison who said, gonna be real with ya, I find Boba Fett to be extremely underwhelming. He was kind of hyped to be this really elusive, skilled bounty hunter, but turned out to be kind of lame. Yeah, he had some interesting moments, but a lot of the coolest stuff about him either happened off-screen, no disintegrations, or were only implied. I personally would have loved to see more action scenes with him, showing us how cool he was instead of just telling. In fact, while everything doesn't have to be determined by some fight in the Star Wars universe, I think Mando would take care of Boba Fett if it came down to it. No doubt about it. Overall, I'm going to have to give him a C, which he barely makes. And I certainly think we're going to see that showdown between Boba Fett and Din Djarin in The Mandalorian, and it's going to be very interesting to see which one scores a win over the other. I mean, do you build up the legend of Din Djarin even more, but then at the expense of Boba Fett, who, let's be real, last we saw him, he took a really bad L at the Sarlacc pit? Or do you present Boba Fett as the best of the best, that we've always kind of thought he was, and he gets the win over The Mandalorian? Now, more than likely, it'll be a little bit of both. It'll be a kind of a win on both sides, and in the end, there will be some sort of mutual parting between them, I'd guess, and that Boba Fett will end up as a reoccurring character over the seasons, and we'll even see them work together at some point in the future. Alright, and speaking of The Mandalorian, we have this comment from the Codeaster who said, honestly, I think this should have waited until after The Mandalorian Season 2. We also have this one from Christopher Lawrence who said, just like Maul, underwhelming although cool looking in the movies, but in the Clone Wars turns into a pretty awesome character. If we got Boba vs. Cad Bane finished then, I think Boba would be as good as Maul. Edit, Thor, if you see this, perhaps you should think about redoing polls for Ahsoka, Maul, Rex, etc., since those were done before the Clone Wars Season 7. Love your vids, and may the Force be with you. Okay, so first of all, may the Force be with you too, and with everyone else watching. And I do like that idea, and we'll probably redo some of the polls when new content for a character gets released, which is already the case with Maul and Ahsoka being in Season 7. Though I don't know that I'll do a whole new video on the character after that. And before I even start to do them, I'll give you all a chance to give your thoughts and opinions in the comments about whether or not the new score should replace the old score or be averaged with it, or what the case should be. And if you'd want a whole new video, or just maybe me including a couple top comments in a different video covering a new character. Anyway, for now, let's get to just a few final comments before wrapping this up, starting with this one from Absolutely Studios, who said, "Average. He's just kind of there, but he does it really well." Then there's this one from Asher Thompson, who said, "Like so many other potentially great characters, the only thing holding him back was screen time." Then also this one from Darth Vegeta, who said, "I prefer Jango Fett, who, after Vader, is my favorite, but Fett is iconic. As a minor character, he's an A-lister in importance." Then also this one from Garlic Bread, who said, "Kind of like Darth Maul in Phantom Menace, awesome character with about 5 lines of dialogue that dies in a disappointing way." We also have this one from Gator70, who said, "Boba Fett was the epitome of Star Wars cool. You see, there was a time when we had very little content besides the OT themselves. Things were mysterious, and we didn't get an answer to every nagging question. He was just this cool-looking, mysterious dude. That's it. People forget what made Star Wars so awesome, and that was things just looked pretty darn cool, physics be damned." Also, we have this one from Green Man, who said, "Boba Fett, the best dressed life form in the Star Wars universe." Then finally here we have this one from Jack Maddox, who said, "The man, the myth, the legend. Back when he was an exiled journeyman protector on Concord Dawn, to his escape from the Sarlacc pit, and all his EU stories in between, to his eventual retcon into a clone, and all the prequel stories that came after. Love him or hate him, Boba Fett sells. Blame the mystique, the armor, or just his overall Eastwood cowboy-esque bravado, but Fett just has something. It's no secret Lucas hated the popularity this background character got over his Skywalker boys, but even after the incredibly embarrassing death, people still wanted to see more of this character. In movies, he really hasn't been portrayed as much. The Clone Wars showed us more, but still, we've yet to get anything to really show us why he's the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy outside of novels and comics. I will still always put Boba as an A tier, just because even Vader respected him. You don't achieve that title, that notoriety, without earning it. I just wish we got to see more of it." Very, very well said, and I don't have much to add other than to say that I think we'll be seeing more of his story very soon, that him showing up in The Mandalorian could be just the beginning of an expansion of the character in the new canon, and that even if we don't see the Cad Bane arc, there's a really good chance he'll be showing up in the Bad Batch series, and maybe even in his own show on Disney Plus someday. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of Boba Fett, or what I or anyone else had to say about him in this video, or feel free to nominate and or vote for which character we do next, or leave a comment about how you think redoing polls for characters with new content should be done. One way or another, do leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.